We're finally on my favorite, passage 1 and passage 2. I love them because I like things that I can predict. And I always know this about passage 1 and passage 2. This guy and this guy are not going to agree. There's always going to be some sort of a disagreement. Sometimes they get rude to one another. That's fun to read. I have read them before where they call each other out, or like if it's a historical document of that they're writing letters to one another and they're really disagreeing, old school style, meet me outside when the mail comes and I will write you a mean letter. And this is just like, I always know that passage 1 and passage 2 are not going to agree, and therefore it becomes the easiest one for me to do on the SAT, because I always remember that they don't agree. I want to also tell you that I used to teach it where we would read passage 1 and we would read passage 2 and we would figure out what the disagreement was. But in the past couple of years, I've switched it up and we're going to read passage 1 and then answer the questions, because there's more questions about passage 2. So let me tell you a couple things I know from studying this test for a really long time and teaching for a really long time. When kids get to this one, this is the 4th passage that we have read in this booklet. Kids are tired. This is probably more words they've read than they read in kindergarten. Like, it's been a long time since you've read this many words, unless you're like me and you're a reader and you read just because you love reading. But I don't meet too many of those kids anymore. So if you're like every other kid that I've met, reading isn't like the number one thing you're going to do. Honestly, I don't know what else you do with your time. And I read every night before I fall asleep. I read on the weekends. It's definitely my way of relaxing, and I love reading. But you do something else. I don't know. You guys, I don't know what you do with your time. I don't know. And so let's have a look. I want to just show you about these questions. Passage 1, passage 2, they don't agree. Passage 1, just for the sake of this, goes from line 1 to line 40. Passage 2 goes to line 41 to line 84. Okay? So as used in line 22, that's a passage 1 question. Thoreau. Passage 1 is adapted from Henry David Thoreau. Passage 2 is adapted from Martin Luther King Jr. So Thoreau, that's a passage 1 question. Choice evidence for the answer to the previous question, that's a passage 1 question. Interesting, look at this. According to King, we're on to passage 2. Which choice provides the best evidence? Passage 2. Line 57, passage 2. We only had 3 questions from passage 1. Primary purpose of each passage, that's a passage 2 question. I'm going to show you. Both authors would likely agree. That's a passage 2 question. I'm going to show you. In the passages, a significant difference in how the 2 authors discuss morality is that the Thoreau indicates, and then they're saying king, 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 king. That's a passage 2 question. Assuming he agrees with the assertions in the final paragraph of passage 1, King would most likely recommend which course of, that's a passage 2 question. So there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 questions on passage 2, 3 questions on passage 1. Okay, so why am I showing you this? Because every other kid in the room, in fact, you may have been almost guilty of this if I didn't teach you it. Every kid in the room is going to sit here and read passage 1, because it's what they're taught to do, right? We're taking the SAT, we better read it. They're going to read it. Passage 1 is higher lexile. It has more difficult vocabulary words. And quite frankly, might be a little more boring than passage 2. Passage 2 is a lower lexile. Oftentimes passage 2 is a little bit shorter, and passage 2 is has not as many difficult vocabulary words. See how good the College Board is at writing this test. College Board is brilliant. They know a teenager's mind. So once again, I told you, they get to passage 1 and passage 2. They're going to sit here and read all of passage 1, and they're going to like take up all their mental energy reading passage 1. But remember how many questions there are for passage 1? There's only 3. I'm not saying we're not going to read passage 1. We're going to read it because I want you to get those 3 correct, because you get a higher score for each one you get correct. So I'm going to show you how to get those ones correct. But then the kids, every other kid in the room, I swear you can watch it happen, but you're not going to, because I want you to pay attention to your test. They are going to skim passage 2. Every other kid but you in that room is going to skim passage 2 because they're tired. They are tired. If they didn't already look at the clock up here to see how much more time they have because they're tired, they're going to look at the clock right here and see how much more time they have because they're tired. So they're going to skim through here and not really pay attention. And how many questions came from passage 2? 7. We were right. We counted 7. Didn't we count 7? I'll count again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Yeah. I mean, yeah. Also, when I look at release tests, the greatest amount of a score. So you're not going to get the same +1, +1, +1, +1 for the first 9. You're not going to get the same amount of score for each one. There are easy questions. You've seen some of these so far. There are medium difficulty questions, and then there are hard questions. And you get more weight for the hard questions. So your score is weighted based on how many hard questions you get correct. And then you'll get the points for the easy ones you get correct and the medium difficulty ones you get correct. So if you look at all the release tests, I've looked at them since 2010. They changed the test in 2016, but it's still the same. Passage 1 and passage 2 have the more difficult, the H level questions, the hard level questions. That, to me, means that kids' scores are either made or broken on passage 1 and passage 2. And that's why I'm so excited to teach this one, because it doesn't need to be that way. Your score is going to go up if you get more of the passage 1 and passage 2 questions correct. It's like, it's just, I believe it. I really truly believe it. And if I believe it, then you're welcome to believe it too. So let's get these ones right. All right. Passage 1 and passage 2. Started off here. We are absolutely going to read this. We have no background. And we also have to understand what these two authors are talking about. I need the bigger, like the theme. I need the thing that they're both talking about, the topic that they're both talking about. In fact, I write it at the very top up here. So this, the introduction is the only kind of background information you're going to get. It's really important. I have told you on every single one, this is really the one that you have to read. You have to read this. So we're going to read this, and then we're going to read passage 1, and then we're going to go answer the 3 questions from passage 1, and then we'll talk about passage 2. Okay. So passage 1 is adapted from Henry David Thoreau, Resistance to Civil Government. Ooh, Resistance to Government. Originally published in 1849. So this is a historical document, my friends. Passage 2 is adapted from Martin Luther King Jr., Letter from Birmingham Jail. Copyright 1986 by the state of Martin Luther King Jr. Thoreau wrote at a time when slavery was legal in the United States. Resistance to civil government. In 1963, King was arrested while protesting racial segregation in Birmingham, Alabama, and he wrote this letter while in jail. The letter to Birmingham jail. Oh, I bet you've read excerpts from this before in your classes. All right, let's read passage 1. We'll come back together and answer the 3 questions. But really, what we're looking for is there's one topic. I'm gonna guess that it has something to do with civil government. Is it resistance to civil government? Or is it just blatantly following civil government, like passively? Okay, let's see what Thoreau says. Interesting. Okay, so I don't know if these 2 are gonna completely disagree. I think he started off saying that men are followers and he thinks that men should be men first and subjects afterwards, but they're often treated as subjects first and then men afterwards. And laws never gave a person a conscience. Most of the people serve the state just as machines with their bodies. It's important to keep order. Men can be manufactured. That was interesting to me. I mean, he was saying like the government has a lot of power over people, but the people, and if they follow what the government says, then they are esteemed good citizens. But if they are, distracted and they want to act and think of themselves, then they're commonly treated as enemies by the government. On line 34. That was really interesting. I like this. And then in the very last paragraph on line 35, so how can a man to behave toward the American government today? He cannot without disgrace be associated with it. So it's very disgraceful to be associated with the American government today, because the government today is, and so this was from 1849, is the slaves' government, my government, which is the slaves' government, also, that it is disgraceful to be a part of a government that believes that that a man should be enslaved as well. I can't see Dr. Martin Luther King disagreeing with this. But let's just start on answering some of the questions. Again, here's our most nearly means. Line 22, command most nearly means. I'm gonna go to line 22. We're gonna get rid of it. We're not looking at the option they're giving us. Such get no more respect. Such attend no more respect than men of straw. Such get no more respect. You can't get more respect. I'm going to keep looking back though. Such get no more respect than men of straw or a lump of dirt. Such order, no more respect. Such order, I'll keep it. Such dominate, no, that doesn't work in that sentence. Such dominate, no more respect. Such overlook, no. And such deserve. Such deserve, no more respect. Between such get, what you're getting, and you deserve, D would be the answer. Thoreau makes which point about people who follow their conscience. They often band together with other entities to form corporations. That wasn't what he was saying about corporations. He was saying corporations employ the people, but a corporation of conscientious men is a corporation with a conscience. And I don't think he was talking about corporations the way that we use corporations today. I think he was saying like groups of people. So anyway, they don't often band, he didn't say this, they don't with other entities to form corporations. People who follow their conscience, they tend to have a mutually antagonistic relationship with their governments. Mutually antagonistic relationship with their governments. I think the only thing that you may stumble over is that antagonistic, but I guarantee you an English teacher has talked to you about the characters in a reading, and one is a protagonist, like they're the ones that are always reaching for good, always trying to do good, and then there's the antagonist that is, you know, antagonizing that protagonist to do something else, you know, kind of like Shrek and Lord Farquaad, antagonist. Shrek, protagonist, Lord Farquaad. Did I say it wrong? Shrek, protagonist, Lord Farquaad, antagonist. So they tend to have a mutually antagonistic relationship with their governments. I kind of like that because he really was saying that man cannot have a relationship with the government because if they were associated with it, they would be disgraceful. Let's see. They generally believe that the exercise of the moral sense is what makes them human. All right, let's hold on to that for a second. They hold their legislators to a different moral standard than they do, which they hold themselves. There was no evidence of that in the reading. They didn't talk about that. That's interesting, but they didn't talk about that in the reading. So people who follow their conscience, they have a mutually antagonistic relationship with the government, or are they generally believe that the exercise of the moral sense is what makes them human? The answer is very clearly B. And which choice provides the best evidence? What I'm going to look for immediately is our question order rule. So I want to see if there's any questions before that help me get rid of any of these. We started off on line 22, and then we're going to, the very end is line 40. So we're only 2 in, maybe towards the beginning. However, if we started off on line 22, I'm going to get rid of A and I'm going to get rid of B because we started off on line 22. And therefore the answer should be between C or D, right? So because I narrowed it down to 2. Actually, what stopped me for a minute was it actually should be D because we started off on line 22. So it really can't be C. So if my theory is correct, let's just start with D. Let's start here, but we have to come up here. Thoreau makes which point about people who follow their conscience? Is it line 30 to a few? Is there which one? We're treated as enemies by it. If they follow their conscience, they are, for the most part, treated as enemies by their government. All right, we're done. All right, now we go to passage 2. Remember, we're going to read this one carefully. We have 7 questions all about this passage. It's Dr. Martin Luther King. We're going to read it carefully. We're going to mark it, and we're looking to see what he's saying about a person's relationship to civil government. Okay, I'm really curious about this. What a beautiful, what a beautiful letter. Oh my goodness. What an honor to read that. What an honor. Gosh, at the very last. Oh, almost brings me to tears. Is in reality expressing the highest respect for the law. Break the law, but do it openly and doing willingly and doing lovingly. And you are therefore expressing the highest respect for the law. So the relationship to the civil government, you follow the laws. He's not saying don't follow the laws, you follow the laws. You understand that there are just laws and there are unjust laws. It's a moral responsibility to obey just laws. It's a moral responsibility to disobey unjust laws. What a beautiful letter written while he was in prison. Or jail. Sorry, he was in the Birmingham jail. He wasn't in prison. He was in the jail. Okay. According to Dr. King, an unjust statute should not be. All right, stop. We're not even going to look at the answers. This is the big picture question. We know the answer. According to King, an unjust statute should not be followed, right? We're going to break that law. An unjust statute should not be. Regarding as having moral authority, yes. Broken in a manner intended to, so no. It should be broken in a manner intended to attract attention. Viewed as detrimental. No, it should be viewed as detrimental. Used to enforce obedience to moral law. So between this or this, which one would you say is the answer? Regarded as having moral authority. Absolutely. Okay, which choice provides the best evidence for answer the previous question? Let's see if there's a possibility that we can get rid of any. No, because we haven't even started on passage 2 yet. So actually what I'm looking at next is in line number 34, starts on line 57. And because it starts on line 57, we actually can get rid of D. Because remember the question order rule, as used in line 57, they can't go backwards. So they couldn't go here. So evidence, when we get the best evidence, the answer to the previous question, An unjust statute should not be. Let's see. Okay, that doesn't answer. That doesn't answer that. One has a moral obligation to disobey unjust law. As used in line 57, determine most nearly means we're not looking at the answer choices. We're just going to go to line 57. How does one tell? How does one tell whether a law is unjust? How does one, I'm just going to tell. You got a better word? How does one tell? How does one determine? How does one tell? So let's have a look. Establish. How does one, that works in that context. How does one establish whether a law is just or unjust? How does one regulate? That doesn't, no, that's not tell. How does one direct? No. How does one limit? No. Establish. They use the answer. But okay, so now I want you to really like think about this as we forgot passage 1, right? We're not talking about passage 1, we're only talking about passage 2. So we're picking the answer that's true for passage 2. So if you narrow it down, you have to pick the one that's true for passage 2. I'm going to show you how to do that in these next 4 ones. The primary purpose of passage 2 is to, well, we know the primary purpose because we talked about it at the beginning. They were to talk about the relationship to the civil government, right? So that's kind of like the primary purpose. To make an argument about the relationship between the individual and the law. Could we have said it any better? Like that was what we just advance a view on how laws could be made more just. Neither one of them did that at all. Well, maybe no, I was going to say maybe at the end Thoreau did, because he said this is a government that goes for slavery is not my government, but he didn't advance a view on how it could be made more just. Question the claim to the morality of actions depends on their consequences. Morality of actions depends on their thought. No, they didn't do it. They might have hinted at it, but they didn't do it. Discuss a change in the nature of the state and its power over the individual. Anyway, we had already said A so succinctly, like that's going to happen every time. If you take the time and you're like, all right, what's the topic? And you pick the answer choice that matches the topic, it's going to happen. One of them is just going to be so clear that you'll be able to poke holes in all the other one. And like, that's the way that passage 1 and passage 2 goes. It's so beautiful. That's why your score is going to go up. Both authors would most likely agree, but remember, we're talking passage 2, with which statements about people who obey the government statutes. They fail to follow the guidance of their conscience. So if they obey the government statutes, then they are failing to follow the guidance of their conscience. I don't hate it. I'm not going to get rid of it. They are incapable of exercising moral judgment. No, they didn't go that far. They may not be acting in good accordance with justice, or they value personal morality over public good. No, that wasn't it. So let's both. Which statement about the people who obey their government statutes? They fail to follow the guidance of their conscience. Well, wait a minute. Okay, let's be really clear about this one, because Dr. Martin Luther King said that you should follow moral laws. It's okay to follow moral laws. You should break immoral laws, but you should follow moral laws. So people that obey their government statutes, if it's a moral law, if it is it's sound, then that's not true. Like following a moral law means I am following the guidance of my conscience, or they may not be acting in accordance with justice. So if they follow a moral law, and they obey their government statutes, but if they follow an immoral law and obey their government statutes, they may not be acting in accordance with justice. 37. In the passage, a significant difference in how two authors discuss morality is that Thoreau indicates that, but okay, before we go on, in your passage 1 and passage 2, there's always going to be one of these. And I want you to pay attention to this. It's going to be always on about passage 2. There's going to, and this one will help you save time. There's always going to be an answer where they're going to give you a little piece from passage 1 and then a little piece from passage 2. And you'll see it because it'll go like this and then while king. And I want you to, wherever there is a comma, I want you to draw this line here. So if I see you out in the real world and you're doing this, I'm going to know that you are saving a lot of time, right? So the reason why I did that is because I don't want to read so many words. The SAT College Board knows that they're going to confuse you by giving you a lot of words. That's how they confuse you. We just get spinning in our head with all the words that they give us. So let's pay attention to this. I told you we're going to pay attention to passage 2, right? So let's just pay attention to the ones that are about king, and let's get rid of the ones that are not true, right? So king indicates that most people consistently adhere to moral laws. So on that one, maybe, he didn't say it though. He actually didn't. See, I don't want to get rid of it because I like the answer, but he didn't say that. He didn't say most people consistently adhere to moral laws. So I actually have to get rid of that. People should follow a universal moral code. He did say that. People should follow a universal moral code because that moral code will help you understand which are just laws and which are unjust laws. King indicates that morality and human law are distinct. Nope. He actually said they are one and the same. And king indicates that people should follow just laws. That's true. Okay, so now that we've narrowed it down to 2, that just helped us narrow it down to 2. Now we'll look at the people. Should do what they judge to be right. Thoreau saying that people should do what they judge to be right, that we shouldn't be, what did he say, machines that are working for the government. Even morally good laws should be disobeyed. He didn't say that. King said that. He didn't say that. King said that. Interesting. They try to catch us. Huh. Gosh, they're good at their jobs. But we know the answer. It was B. And assuming that he agrees with the sections in the final paragraph of passage 1, King would most likely recommend which course of action to Thoreau. What did King tell us to do at the end? We're at the end of the questions. So we're at the end of the reading. This is when I was almost in tears. He said, follow just laws and break unjust laws lovingly, openly. Look at all the rest of it. But he said break unjust laws. So what would King recommend to Thoreau? Thoreau should obey laws upholding slavery. I'm already getting rid of it. King would absolutely never say that, and Thoreau wouldn't want to hear him say that. Thoreau should view laws upholding slavery as immoral, but should not break them since doing, nope, King wouldn't say that. King would not say that. Thoreau should break laws upholding slavery, and in doing so should neither hide his actions nor try to avoid his punishment. Yep. Thoreau should openly criticize laws upholding slavery, but should follow them since committing a crime would degrade his personality. Who cares about degrading your personality if you're breaking laws that are upholding slavery? Okay, see? I hope that showed you some strategies for passage 1 and passage 2. Again, there will always be one on your test. Never fail. There's going to be passage 1 and passage 2. Just remember that there's one overall kind of theme or topic that they're talking about, and then the 2 are going to say kind of different things. These guys didn't say too different, but the topic was slavery, so they're going to agree that it wasn't something that we should be following anyway. But it was about relationship to civil government. Who knew that could be fun? I thought that was fun. Thank you for studying with me.